Glad to see you guys again. You know, it's kind of weird actually that we're talking to people we can't see. I was actually thinking about that the other day when you were on the phone with some support team. I'm like, you're hearing that voice, but you would never know what their face looks like. It's kind of strange. Anyway, if you are on your computer, just punch nod.me.
Wait, not even gonna name the show. Like, who are we?
We don't need to name the show anymore.
Good.
People know us all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Midnight Charette podcast. Design, architecture, and everyday life entertainment podcast, hosted by myself, Marina Bourderonnet, and my co-host and subordinate, David Lee.
Okay. Good. You might have to say your name again because I don't think anyone understood that.
Marina Bourderonnet?
Yeah. No.
Yeah. That's enough.
My noodles.
My noodles.
All right.
So before we start, I just want to make sure that you guys are gonna go check out this amazing, incredible store online to do all of your Christmas shopping.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a lot to shop for. And hopefully you have people to shop for, if not just yourself. Go to nod.me. It's an online store curated by an architect, and there is a lot of goods to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is made and designed by young talent from North Africa and the Middle East. It's all very tasteful. It's all very contemporary, but ethnic at the same time. Affordable pricing, more expensive stuff, a lot of different ranges.
Contemporary but ethnic. That is.
And I think it's actually
what does that
pretty
mean?
good. Well, that means it's kind of like you could feel the, like the Middle East, North African culture, but it's very modern in a way. It's not the traditional style. So I think, ethnic and modern is a good way to describe it.
All right.
If you use the code MIDNIGHT when you check out, you get 15% off because, they like us, we like them, so why not? And that's it.
And okay, good. And then also we're supported by Graphisoft and their program ArchiCAD is something that you should check out. Kind of switch it up there. I thought I was going one direction and then I switch it up. It is a BIM program for architects, a very powerful one. They have been in the game for quite some time. Their software is what?
Look at me.
Why?
I'm not down on the table.
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to no one. I'm talking to the listener. So distracts me. They are similar to Revit, but better than Revit in many ways. You should check out one of our recent episodes, 136, I believe, where we talk about software and we compare different BIM programs, specifically Revit and ArchiCAD. But also, you should go to graphisoft.com to scope out the program for yourself. It's fast. It's efficient, is very user-friendly, we find, and it works well on Macs. So that is ArchiCAD by Graphisoft. I'm having trouble speaking today. I think it's this beer.
ArchiCAD.
I don't really like this beer.
What is it? What beer is this?
Altered. Nope, it doesn't say altered. It says alternate dimension.
Oh, here you go. That's why.
It doesn't taste.
That's why you're out of it.
It's 28 IBUs. It doesn't taste very good. Fan.
So what are we talking about today?
I don't know. Well, I figured what we would do is have a little discussion around a topic that was brought up by one of our hotline call-ins, and you should call. I'm kind of drunk. The hotline is 213-222-6950. Call that number. It goes straight to voicemail. And you can leave us any questions, topics, suggestions, or advice for other listeners. We have a couple of recordings coming up that we need your feedback on to structure the conversation. One is about interviewing for jobs, and the other is about taking the architecture registration exam. Architects, the AREs, to become a licensed architect, and we will answer those. But only if you call. That's the thing. All right, let's play the message.
Hey guys, really fun stuff that you guys put on. Also, I kind of want to hear a little bit about what you guys think about the overall conceptual thinking of sustainability in architecture rather than the overall arching of sustainability. And keep the good context. It's really nice. Thank you.
So I didn't catch the last part. He said, the first part he says, what do you think about sustainability conceptually versus sustainability
probably in the most straightforward way.
Whatever
like,
the opposite of conceptual
right?
would be. That's a good guess. And thanks for calling in, man. Super appreciated. So that's what he's asking, right? And let me say also that when people call in and leave a voicemail, it's amazing, and we love having a dialogue, and it's also not easy to do. And so we appreciate that this person made the call, and that we have some other ones coming up soon. But so let me ask you then, Marina, what do you think about sustainability in a conceptual manner? What are your thoughts about sustainability?
Well, I'm not sure what it means by conceptually. Is it like philosophically?
Sure, let's go with that. What do you think?
Like, why does the human race has to think about sustainability? But because the fact that we fucked it up, and now we're looking back and realizing all the mistakes. Like, it's not like, I don't know. I mean, it's not like a cool concept to adopt. It's more like a necessity. So conceptually,
it's difficult. I think the thing that he's alluding to is that...
Or is it a design concept,
Or that too, it could be.
I don't know.
Do you have an answer to that one?
Well, yeah, I think ideally sustainability shouldn't be something that you kind of, try to check off your list after you've designed a project. I think certain aspects should be... It shouldn't be a separate thing. You should design a project and it should be sustainable throughout. Like, you don't need to be LEED certified to be sustainable necessarily. So yeah, in that broader scope, I would say that.
I think the thing that he's bringing up and that you're talking about is the big distinction between sustainability being this list of criteria you check off from a list, or is it something that you actually think about that's inherent to the design? And also, very similar to that is our awareness of sustainable practices in architecture as practitioners. Also, from the perspective of the inhabitants, is it passive or active? Meaning to say that, is it? Can I have it?
No.
Okay. Meaning to say that, and actually, Wes Jones has some really interesting opinions about this. And his project, and a bunch of other architects, their project, the Super Green project. So we did an episode with Wes Jones. You should check that out, where we talk about this kind of, and we talk with Doug Jackson, who is another architect who participated in the Super Green exhibition. There's like 5 architects that all did projects, and it's related to the issue of sustainability in that those projects looked at the relationship between people, humankind, and the environment, right? And what those projects did, I'm going to butcher the summary, but what a lot of those projects did was to mediate that relationship, that boundary between the physical threshold between a person who needs to be protected from the natural environment and the natural environment itself, right? Now, typically, you ask most people and most architects, like, what kind of boundary should that be, right? Well, it's one of comfort, obviously. We want to design spaces that are comfortable. And that's even, I think, being executed to a much higher degree now because of technology, smart homes and things like this. So I just walk into a room, it's a perfect temperature. Windows and doors open for me. Everything's automated, right? So... And in other words, that system, the building, is doing a lot of work to control the environment, to shape the environment around you, to protect you from the natural outdoors, to make you comfortable. But as far as the inhabitant realizes, it's a very passive thing because it's happening automatically, right? The Super Green projects propose that maybe what we should be doing is actually... as architecture, instead of basically shielding humans and hiding the natural environment from humans, it should every now and then interject into life and actually amplify the natural environment in specific ways to highlight the relationship and our kind of fragility, right? So that we become much more aware of the natural environment and our actual state on planet Earth. The problem is that as technology has evolved over time, now I'm talking human existence kind of timeline, we've become further and further away from natural existence, which is natural. I mean, they were kind of expected, right? And that's not a new statement. But the super green projects and some other people, the thought is like, well, maybe if we think that's not a good thing for architecture, then maybe there's a way to introduce nature back into life, to actually even disrupt life, to have us have a bigger understanding of the place that we're in, right? Does that make sense what I'm saying? And for me, I think that's a very powerful way to look at it. The projects they did, they are, how would you describe it? They are, I was going to say academic, but that's not the right word. What's the fucking word? They're not meant to be built. They could be built. I mean, they're architecturally, they could be built. They're not like floating cities, but they're not really meant to be built.
They're concepts.
They're concepts. But I think aspects of that thinking could be employed into more realistic architecture that could be actually built and inhabited by real life people. It is a very interesting way to think about the relationship between man and nature. And also, I think a very provocative one, because for the average person, it's like, no, I don't fucking want that. You think I want like the daylight to be disrupting me, or my own desires and behaviors, what I want to do in the middle of the day, my life to be controlled at all or disrupted at all by my surroundings? No. If I'm paying an architect, I want it so that I can fully have control and I can do what I want to do. But that is a very self-centered way of thinking, and it's hugely problematic if that's the only train of thinking you have.
Yeah. Just go on. Yeah, it is, and that's where I think sustainability in those days right now, it's a very shallow word, and there is so many nuance to that word, and nuance that could be developed in the design world and not just in like the pure data based world. That I think that's what we should be excited about. The sustainability in itself, I mean, it's not like a new concept, like it was not invented. Sustainability has been on Earth since the mans have been on Earth, like the cavemans were, thinking about using local materials and natural light and all of those things. It's not like new things that we came up with. I
don't know if they thought about it. I think it was more
but
like
civilizations and different cultures, and it's still going on. It's not something that architects just discovered. So kind of like going back to certain roots, I think makes sense. And like you said, there is different way to approach sustainability.
Yeah. It's difficult because on the one hand, there is this philosophy that technology will solve all of the world's problems. If Elon Musk, we just give him all the money in the world. We don't worry about the fact he smoked some weed on a podcast. Who gives a fuck? It's legal anyway. And we'll let him do things, and he can harbor the energy of the sun, and we'll be flying around underground, flying in tunnels or flying in sky or whatever, and everything's going to be groovy. He's going to figure out a way to have a massive battery that's going to power the entire world. And let's say that was actually feasible, and we could do it. And it seemed like, there's enough of the population that's on board with it, so the governments are going to get behind it, and it happened. I guess that's a solution, but I feel like even then it's going to catch up to us at some point. There's this... The real challenge is that what we're talking about is a fundamental shift in lifestyle and a fundamental shift in thinking of how we exist in the planet. And it's not a shift, it's an expansion of the mindset. And that's really difficult for the average person to do, because the average person has many other things to worry about. And also a lot of people just don't give a fuck. They have micro on the scale of the planet, compared to the scale of within the scale of the planet and the scale of human existence, the issues that most people think about are nano.
Well, and sustainability is not affordable to everybody.
It's not
sustainability oftentimes is only owned by the rare few that can spend the money toward it. So, I mean, you take a simple thing such as here in San Francisco, where you do, you sort your trash in like 3 different containers. The city charges you $7 per trash can per week every time you put that trash can out of the street. If you make no money, you can afford it. You're not going to recycle. It's not for a lack of wanting to. You can't afford it, right?
Recycle or doing composting or whatever.
It sucks that a lot of time it is based on economic reasons.
And there for sure could be huge incentives to have sustainable energies and all these kinds of things be much more in demand, and that falls on the shoulders of the government, really, to produce those kinds of incentives. I mean, to be honest, when I was going through architecture school, and for a good portion of my career, well, let's say primarily in school, I really did not give a fuck about sustainability, because it was only talked about in the very kind of, I don't know, pragmatic, very straightforward, very much like, I use low E glass and now my building is whatever. And as for someone who was always more on the conceptual ends of things, and as a result, I never completed any work, but on the conceptual ends of things, when I heard students or teachers talk about, having a green... so I have this project. They present the project to students. It's fucking dog shit. Everyone knows it's dog shit. I know it's dog shit. Has no concept, has no form. They barely produce anything. And at the end of the presentation, they go, also, I have a green roof. I have low-A glass. I have, northern-facing windows. And I have a sawtooth roof, which is good for lighting, right? I have cross-ventilation. And I also have... what's another thing? Or whatever, right? Oh, I'm using rammed earth, for geothermal, whatever. I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like, that is not design. It's not creative. It's not anything. It's you going through a checklist. It's a cop-out. It is the total opposite of what we're meant to be doing. And what I despised as a student was when critics or teachers ate that fucking shit up. Oh, yes. Rammed earth. It's very interesting. No, it's not. Rammed earth is interesting if you have something to say about it. Either you're rammed earth and things like that are only interesting if you are able to further the conversation and the development of rammed earth. You have something new to add to the entire discourse of architecture, which is difficult to do as a student. Or it's interesting if you as a student found out something new to you natively, organically in your process. You say, I'm thinking about this, I came through this process and I end up at this conclusion, and these ways we're going to do things. That's amazing. Really interesting. It's already been done. I don't give a fuck, because you have proven you can think creatively about this thing. Those are the only two situations in which case where something like rammed earth or sustainable panels or whatever else is going to be interesting. It's not interesting just to include it based on some Wikipedia research. And when I was in school, that's basically what it mostly was. And presentations given by faculty members were like, for a long time, facades were a huge thing. Would that happen at your school? The double facade?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone, the gherkin, double facade, double facade. Yeah. And just everyone in the school, I have a double facade. And I'm like, who the fuck says that it's interesting? I know the double facade provides you categorically, quantitatively, X, Y, and Z things. Great.
It's almost like, whenever you're like on a BIM program, let's say, and you select a component and you just plug it in, you basically just plug it in an option out of the catalog, but you're not questioning it or making it your own or even trying to create it from scratch. Like the beauty in sustainability conceptually is that it would give room for designers to come up with new ideas, new solutions, not using the one from the books and the lead credits and whatever, but actually reimagine things, approach it in a completely different way than what we're accustomed to.
Yeah.
It's almost like medicine, right? You have doctors that just apply the same medicine or the same treatment, and then you have ones that experiment, that try to find new ways to do surgery, they just try new things because there is room for that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing with school is that, and for school and outside of school, that's what you're supposed to be doing. And it really irks me when people who don't think creatively, they just take what's already been done and they repeat it, and everyone says it's good because we know it's good. So, generally speaking, having a passive house that's able to be energized, has energy provided passively, so it's not relying, it can be off the grid and et cetera, and using natural daylight and stuff we all understand this is good, right? And there's a few key strategies, let's say, that are good. Those were created probably by the cave people, a long time, right? And
it's just science. It's nothing new.
But the thing is also, it's so well documented how to do that it's not interesting if you do it. And not only that, here's another problem with it happening in schools is that you're not actually doing it. You're just saying that your building is going to do it. But the technical challenges of actually executing it, you haven't done, and you won't do until you practice. All you've basically said is, I want to do this stuff. But someone else is going to figure it out, because there are entire industries built around each of these things who know what the fuck needs to happen to make it work.
And it's almost like, in the design process, the students or whoever does this project, they just stop at the research phase.
Yeah.
They did not destruct the concept of a skylight or double facade. Like, what is a double facade? What does it do? Is there another way you could create a double facade without using the component double facade? Like, can you use it for something else? Like, you should really just grab those sustainable concepts that you find and just explode them, like turning them into pieces and understand each piece, because that's where your creation is going to start.
And I think that I think creating a design is really fascinating, because I think at the end of it, I think you will realize at some point that all of your creative thinking and your designs are related to how you view the world politically, and your political stance, and how you exist socially also. And I say this because it's tied to morality and principles in a way. That's kind of, I almost don't know how to, there's rings to a design idea. So you have a design idea, right? Then there's an outer ring around that idea, which is tied to a slightly more philosophical and larger kind of view of the world. And if you go, and every idea has these rings, and every idea is eventually bleed out to the largest ring, which is, again, goes back to your political stance and how you decide to exist in the world and principles. Every idea is tied to that, I firmly believe. And so when I see a design that only focuses on the quantitative things, like we're kind of talking about, or just copying, pasting stuff, that's not really truly a design, because it's just the central piece. They haven't gone out to the outer rings. They haven't expanded to the outer rings. And that's the proof of a really good design, and when it ties to those things. That's also why we have discourse. That's why architects write papers and papers and papers and do this stuff, because it's tied to this other, much larger thinking that has to be discussed and researched and thought about through other means. And
that's why architects are not engineers.
That's why that's why architects are not engineers. And so in the design process of a sustainable project, right, if that's the core, one of the core issues you're wrestling with, to know whether or not you're properly investigating the issue of sustainability, you have to be aware of these kinds of ring expansion things, right? And I think, let's see, what was I going to say? Ring expansion things. Oh yeah. So then I think you will find pretty quickly and early on that one of the things you have to consider is, how does the idea of sustainability affect the inhabitants and what they think of it? Should it matter to them at all? So this is not just about practices in architecture, that you yourself are going to source materials that are local. They're going to do this and that, all things we already know about. But how does it affect people socially? That's the real rub for me, for most architecture anyway, actually, for most architectural questions. How does it affect people socially? If your design can ask that question and provide an answer to it, and your building can begin to provide an answer to it, then you're doing it.
To me, sustainability is almost like learning how to be kind in design. Be kind to the people who are going to occupy the space. Be kind to the site in which you're going to build. Be kind to what materials you're using. But it's something that you should have within you already. Like, it doesn't make sense to go by stone from a country that's 16 hours away from the site you're building on, which it just doesn't make any sense, right? And recycling, reusing, those are notions that I think by now, 2019, like we all understand, we're all aware of, and that has been implemented. That's not that complicated. So it's almost like, okay, we should be done talking about those because those should already be part of the process and everything else. Now that we understood all of those things that we already have to do and we're doing, let's refocus the sustainability dialogue on the more conceptual approach.
Because also the thing is, like, when you just go by these checklists, you completely you're doing a disservice to yourself, because you're not allowing yourself to think outside of that system. Maybe we shouldn't, as Wes Jones and the Super Green projects point out, maybe we shouldn't actually just be doing everything to make a building super comfortable, right? Maybe actually technology that allows to us to, even technology that is powered entirely by the sun, maybe we shouldn't make it invisible, right? But this kind of thinking only happens if you just step outside of this, like, checking boxes. So it's a very damaging thing when we allow ourselves to only do that, and even more greatly damaging when we have institutions and people we look up to seem to be thoroughly and completely satisfied by projects who only look at that aspect of it. It's a problem.
And I mean, like, stop using green roof everywhere and then call it sustainable.
Oh.
Yeah, that's one thing too that was super trendy in school at my time, was like, I have a green roof on my project, so it's sustainable. Well, let me tell you, that's not enough.
Farms are really popular.
But that concept came out like 20 years ago or something. It's not new anymore. Like, what have people done with green roofs since? What have designers done with that?
And we're not saying that including those things are bad, but I think as architects, it's not our job, again, to just reproduce. Yeah, like you didn't invent a green roof. Yeah, and it's tricky because there's a few things. The first one is this reminds me of the discussion of, like, how to improve most cities. Well, so like Los Angeles, okay, well, less cars, there's things like this, but also, like, more trees. It's an easy solution, right? More trees, and wider sidewalks, and bike lanes. Those are not new. They're not particularly interesting in terms of conceptually, but those would have a major, major impact. So I'm not saying that those are not worthwhile and we shouldn't do those in practice. We absolutely should. I'm not saying if LA could choose some radical thing to do to its entire city that it should do some much more conceptual experimental thing over the basics of just wider bike lanes and wider sidewalks and trees. But this thing is very hypnotizing, that bracelet. What was I talking about?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not saying don't do green roofs. Green roofs are amazing, and like every single building should have a green roof. Like every single building that's existing and that sucks, construction-wise, you put a green roof and that would improve many, many things. But if you're designing a new project and you're trying to be conceptual about the way you're approaching sustainability, you can just plug in a green roof.
Well, every project should be conceptual. And that's the thing, right? It's not actually good enough. First of all, if every single office did the baseline good sustainable architecture, that'd be amazing. But it's not going to happen. If we're talking about true architecture, it has to be conceptual. You have to be questioning things, and you have you'll find that what distinguishes for me, architecture from just the building is when architecture actually begins to question its relationship to the people. And it's not a form investigation. It's not a facade investigation. It's not a matter of new technologies or new things to produce energy more efficiently. It's how does it relate to the people inside, and their social and political stance. The other aspect of this conversation, which is really important, is that I'm also not advocating that we fully give in to sustainable practices as the primary way of working, and that every single building needs to be done that way. There is this idea that humankind is a weird thing because our relationship to nature is one of confrontation. We have to wear clothing. We have to eat certain kinds of foods, or otherwise it upsets our stomach. We only like temperatures that are like in a very specific range of like 68 to like 73 degrees. Beyond that, it feels a little bit uncomfortable. Like, we're very sensitive beings, really.
Kind of annoying.
We don't really belong here. I always like, if God designed things, why the fuck did he make the world so difficult for us to live in? Why not make it like, so it's always the perfect temperature? Why even have,
because we're not the only people living on Earth.
So our existence here is like really, really strange. And it is one of confrontation, and it's a beautiful one because of that. And so what that means is, inherent in our existence is that we're going to fuck shit up no matter what we do. Our footprint is going to be there. It's not going to be non-existent, in terms of the natural setting. And also we have other motivations that drive us, the arts. It's completely superfluous things that have nothing to do with survival and maintaining the balance of natural ecosystems. So it is an interesting thing that we have to satisfy those innate human requirements as part of who we are as a species, and also deal with the fact that we're all living in I like to think of as one giant room with only so much resources to deal with. And it's a little bit of both. You can't go fully over to the sustainable route, because then if you're doing that, you're not questioning these other things. You're not thinking about the arts. I think it's perfectly fine for certain projects to use stones and materials that are from the other side of the world for certain reasons, if it's furthering the conversation of human existence, right? If it's questioning that. So it's not easy to say it's all one way or the other. There's a confrontation built into our existence.
Yeah.
Is that conceptual? Is that
I don't know. I hope it is.
And I've said it before also, it's a matter of scale, right? If the planet is this room, it's the 12 foot by 12 foot room, right? And this is your domain. You live in this room. That's the only room you live in. And it's made of, there's all this stuff. There's like a Tinker Toy Lego set, right? And you're going to build things out of Legos or whatever. And you have waste, and you just choose to put the waste in the corner of the room. You let that waste pile build up. Well, in a 12 by 12 room, pretty quickly, you're going to have to address the pile of shit in the corner, right? And you're very aware, because of the scale of the room, that like, this is not sustainable. Right, I'm using up things that are not going to be there anymore, and they're encroaching on my space. It's finite. So
when are you going to approach that pile of shit that's sitting in the corner?
It's finite. I can see it's there. It's going to be a problem. And so what would I do? Well, I'd figure out a way to make use of that stuff over and over and over again, right? And that would be very clear to anyone living in a 12 by 12 space. The problem is the planet Earth is really big, so we just don't see that pile of shit, and we don't think about it. And that is probably fundamentally probably the most fundamental issue that there is. How do you get people to be aware of these much larger issues? If you can answer that question in a piece of architecture, call us up. Then you've done well. You've done extremely well. Right. All right. So that was that.
Yeah. Wow, you had more to say about this than I would have expected you to. Great. So now you're exhausted for the next one.
Okay. We also got a few other people reaching out quite a while ago. We're in the season. The saison is upon us. Turkeys, giblets, and little kids dressing up as whatever they want to be, living vicariously through fake characters and nonsense and sugar that they don't deserve, and parents who dress up like ninjas, and then when they go to an Asian house, it's very awkward because you're kind of like, well, you're kind of dressed up like a ninja. I'm not Japanese, but it's a little awkward right now, don't you think?
Very offensive.
Yeah.
It's like if someone was knocking at my door wearing stripes, a beret, and a baguette, and I'd be like, I don't know. Yeah,
a little weird, right?
A little weird.
Oh, so you know is it the president of France, right? No, France. Canada. He's in trouble because of blackface.
Oh, no.
Right?
I don't watch the news.
It's come up. People are in trouble. Like back in the day, like 30 years ago or whatever, they did blackface. They blackface? You know what blackface is?
When you paint your face in black?
Yeah, to pretend like you're an African.
Oh, people do that?
But no, they don't do it anymore. The people did it in the past.
They did that?
Yeah, in show business and stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
For like what, entertainment?
For entertainment, and then people would do it, as to fuck around and
the
stuff.
The past is not always bright.
And that's probably not a good... It's a little insensitive, but I also think that, if someone did it 25 years ago when they were 15... 30 years ago, and now it's causing them, like, it's they're 15. Let it go.
I mean, the morality is you gotta clean up your Facebook account and hide those pictures from the world.
The thing is, like, I think there are categorically things that are truths, like, period, like, and there are things that are racist, period. It doesn't matter what time and what era you exist in, that this thing is racist. Slavery is, like, categorically not good. But I don't think you can look at a person who existed in one period and judge him based on your principles of your time and only use that as a criteria. I don't think it's fair.
Well, I think it's kind of a cheap way to go against somebody, you know, because you're judging events that were in the past and that in that past were not necessarily
it's a different situation.
Things.
And consider how radically everything the world has changed because of technology. Like, it's not even, it's unfair is what I think it is. Actually, I was trying to think, I don't think I've ever did blackface. I did role play as Louis Armstrong one time. Did not do blackface. Okay, a record. Did not do blackface. I did do whiteface one time, which is to impersonate a friend of mine. And it wasn't a friend, a guy that in the band or whatever. It was like Halloween, everyone's dressing up, and I pretended to be this other person who was very pale, so I did whiteface.
It's pretty rude.
Now, if in 20 years I get in trouble for letting people know I did whiteface, then it's not a world I want to be in. Okay. Right, so transitioning from whiteface to discussions about portfolios. Now, what other show would you hear these things on? I don't know. Right. So, do you want to read them? Yes, you do.
I don't, but kind of putting me asleep right now, so I might do it.
Oh,
all right. So this question was on YouTube, I think a little while ago. So sorry for getting back to you a little late.
Oh, what I was saying is that we're in the season of applications. That's why this is pertinent, relevant.
That's why Halloween and all of that.
Yeah.
Got it. So we got a comment on portfolio on YouTube. First question or comment that this person posted is cool podcast. Thanks, pretty appreciate it. I got a question maybe a little more for Marina. That's me right there. I was wondering about the goal of these because it seems you're talking about portfolios in the US. Correct. I'm talking about portfolios in the US because I did portfolio in France, but that was to actually apply to architecture school. Well, let me think about
Why don't you finish reading and then you can...
Well, there's two types of portfolio. There is work portfolios and school portfolios, right?
This is,
So, I don't know which portfolio.
Jumping ahead here.
I'm jumping around. Does all you have agreed on could have the same impact in Europe? I mean, architecture has no frontiers, but the practices can be really different.
Just go through it.
Also, do you really think a basic portfolio, like really basic, gives a better image to the employer? In the sense that you're really like clay that the bosses can still shape to their needs, or the studio graphic line, I guess? Because I've seen such a bunch of portfolios and most of them looked pretty much the same, even the projects are completely different. Then by extension, the person who has made that portfolio isn't maybe that good or invested in creative work. That made me feel like if I want to catch the eye, I must give them look at my universe/personality through original graphics, design, and drawings. Make him see that I can be creative anywhere.
Sexist.
I was just going to say. What's your thoughts on this? And will you show us some example or make portfolio reviews? And then in French, sorry for the typos. Don't know if I've been totally clear. Keep up the good work.
You want to read the second one too?
Okay.
It's short.
The second one is, you guys are great. Thank you.
Oh, God.
Do you have any tips specifically for making portfolios to apply for European grad school? Such as different sizes, language, interests?
We get a lot of European questions. I guess it's because you're French.
It's my European fan club.
Okay, so you're the European.
Am I? Am I still European, do you think?
Yeah.
Or, yeah. Well, I mean, that's a lot of questions.
If you're Russian going to the bathroom, what are you when you're in the bathroom? European.
You are not having beer on any recordings ever again.
Is this helpful information?
No, it's helpful, David.
Okay.
All right. So to answer the questions about portfolio, I'm assuming you're talking about portfolios to get in school or work.
The first one he's talking about work.
Okay. Well, in my experience, I've done portfolio for work only in the US, but I would still think that most of the things we said applies.
People are people.
Like you said, architecture has no frontiers on many levels. Practices is different in like the day-to-day technical, how to build things. I think worldwide, or at least Europe and US, the culture in an office is very similar or the same. So I would say, yeah, you could just apply the same advice, to be honest. And then you're asking if I think the portfolio should be really basic.
So
So basically, you're wondering if showing too much personality in your portfolio is going to stop employers to be interested in you because your design identity is a little too strong that they might not be able to picture you doing their work. To that, I don't think so.
What?
I don't think you should be afraid of showing who you are in your
He's
portfolio.
referencing a very specific part of the portfolio podcast, which we did. And if you haven't heard the portfolio podcast, go back and listen to it, where we talk about that in a portfolio, in an application, a resume, cover letter, and the interview, and all that process. You have to convey a sense of openness.
I was talking about the layout and like the actual portfolio graphics, not the projects.
Yeah, no, not the projects. He's talking about the portfolio.
Okay.
But there needs to be a sense of openness conveyed in the application materials and the interview and stuff like this, so that he goes a bit far. I mean, so that the employer knows that you are able to work in a team and you're not going to cause problems, and you can adopt their design sensibilities because they might be very specific. And a lot of more boutique small offices, they maintain their small size because the partner wants to maintain design control over things. Right. And they're not all places, but that might be a factor. So to that end, I think it is possible to go too over the top with the design graphics of your portfolio into being hyper specific. So let's say all of your work is, parabolic, scripted looking morphic kind of geometries, and then you're applying to a place that does all rectilinear. Well, that's a problem. That's a problem, right? So there is something about that, and there is something you have to be aware of. I don't think you need to go to the other end of it though and do a portfolio that is, as he describes, like really basic, so that the employer can mold you like clay. You don't need to do a super basic portfolio, but the thing. I mean, everyone has their different take on how to do their personal portfolio. For me, it was kind of like, the portfolio is about the work. It's not about me doing some wacky book design. So I just want to show the work. To me,
the approach of doing I don't even know if I would call it a basic portfolio, because if you use Times New Romans and you only have like underlined titles, like that's basic. It sucks, right? So you have to have some kind of sensibility to how basic it is. I think it's more about how able and creative and clear are you able to be in presenting work. Mm-hmm. It almost doesn't matter what's in your portfolio at this point, project-wise. It's more about how clear, how well laid out, how sensible it is going to be when you're going to put it on the table.
The projects don't matter, is that what you said?
We're talking about like the actual graphics and like putting it together. We're not talking about the images and like the types of projects.
Okay.
And in that sense, I'm saying you have to be clear. You have to be clear in like how organized it is, how titled it is, how the graphics are legible. It's more how good you are at presenting clearly, shortly, and sharply your project without overdoing it and disguising your presentation with fluff.
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I would agree with that. It also needs to be aesthetically beautiful. So that's where the term basic might be going too far, because basic implies that there's no flourish, there's no kind of design sensibility or specificity. If you can do a very custom, super unique, highly graphic portfolio, but it also checks off all the other boxes that you mentioned, then great. But it's just that it's pretty difficult to communicate complex things concisely anyway. And like 99.9% of the portfolios don't do that, because also it kind of assumes that the student or the person and their work has something to say. You know, you can't have a clear, concise, simple layout that works to exhibit the work at its best and clearest if the work is not good, right? So that's the other thing to consider. Your work can only stand on its own if it can stand on its own. The other factor which he brings up is that like the shock value, like you do need to get the attention of the employer so they see your thing. But that's really a moment. That's one moment. It's like 1 second. All you need them to do is open it. Once they've opened it, then you've gotten past that moment. So in terms of making sure that you stand out, you know, to look different so that the person will want to look at your work and stuff. That's really just, it's a very momentary thing to do. Make the cover yellow or whatever, you know. But there's other ways there's other ways to solve that problem of just like physically handing it directly to someone or calling up or whatever. So I get what he's saying. You know, maybe 8.5 by 11 white cover is not the best thing, and maybe it's too basic, or maybe if it's high gloss, it's okay. I don't know, but on the other hand, the counter argument is that a book that's highly designed shows off creative skills in a different way. You're flexing design muscles, but just through a different medium, and that's great too. But as I've said before, it can be very distracting. It can also be a guise for the inability to think creatively in the actual profession that we're in.
And I mean, I think you can go that route, but you just have to be so good with graphics that unless you're that amazing, I would not even try.
Yeah, let's see. By extension, catch the eye of the person trying, make them see that I can be creative anywhere. Yeah, make them see that I can be creative anywhere. That's a great thing too.
I don't think you want to show them that, you know, you're like clay and they can do whatever they want with your design. I think your project are going to show your identity and like what you're able to be doing, you know, and that's where you don't have to prove that. You don't have to show that off in the graphics of your portfolio.
The thing too is I think it's worthwhile to separate the structural thinking of design versus the aesthetic aspect of design. And an employer is going to be more concerned with the structure of your thinking. So how do I explain this? So in book design, right? If it's well laid out in that it's clear, all the things you mentioned, clear, concise, it tells a story and these kinds of things. But the particular aesthetic is a little bit much for me, or I don't care for it. As an employer, I don't really care because they've at least shown that they're able to have the skeleton is there, right? And some people would disagree. Some people would think that an idea or a specific skeleton or conceptual framework has to be executed in one way aesthetically, and I understand that. But for the most part, there's flexibility, and you will for sure find that in practice when you get out there. That core ideas get executed in a variety of different ways. Get dressed up. Dressed up makes it sound like it's kind of demeaning, but dressed up in different ways. So I think as long as the structure is there, then the aesthetics you can jazz up to be whatever you want. I think the worst thing you can do is emphasize the aesthetics and not have the structure.
It's almost like, you know, you're a tree, right? And you have like great branches, like a good height, like your setup. Doesn't really matter what color your leaves are, right? They can change with the season, they can change with the weather. But if you are a beautiful tree, but there is no leaf that can grow on it, then it's pointless.
Right.
Think about that for a minute.
So I hope that answers the question, and I think the same thing can be applied to projects themselves also.
Yeah.
You know,
it's really about, like you said, it's really, I think the most important is understand how your brain is structured by looking at how you structured your portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah, and the font itself, how big it is, how small it is, if it's blue, green, it doesn't matter, I don't think.
And then the last question was, will you show us some examples or make portfolio reviews?
Sure, sinister thing. Well, I don't know.
Well, show us some example. No, I mean, I think that's something you can look up on your own, and there is no right portfolio. Like, I absolutely would not show you mine just because I just don't show it to people. We could do portfolio review, but I think, our opinion is only our opinion. We're not employers. I don't want to pretend that, you should follow everything I'm going to tell you about your portfolio. We can probably give advice if there is things that you would want advised on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. If this person really wants, he can send it to us and we can take a look, I suppose. But I'm hesitant because if we reviewed a portfolio, I think we would want to do it well, and I think it would take a lot of time, and we're just we're drowning in our own work at the moment. I mean, if you really want to send it, and we can see what can happen, but it's, I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. We'll think about it. We'll think about it. All right. And then the second question from a different person was portfolios for European grad schools.
Unfortunately, I don't have any experience with European grad schools, so I don't know. I would say that everything that we say for portfolios in general would still apply. If you're mailing it physically, I know that there is a difference in paper size in the US versus Europe. So if you're sending a PDF and people are going to print it, you could be sensitive to that just so it doesn't look weird once it comes out of their printer. But that's like a formatting thing. Language.
So my experience with grad school is a little bit different because I kind of I met a person and I was applying for a job, and I wasn't even applying. Well, I was applying for a job, but to him, I was just coming in to have a casual chat. I wanted to see if I could get a job there.
That was a way to not tell you no.
Well, that was offered, to work for free because it was a nonprofit. I'm like, no, I can't do that. And then at the end of it, he was like, okay, why don't you just come to my school? So my experience is kind of not typical. I will say, generally, there are some big differences, I think, between what grad schools want from their applicants versus what...
Actually, I applied to grad school.
You applied and you got into grad school, yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't in Europe, so...
Well, let's say grad schools generally, because we actually got a few different messages about grad school applications and portfolios. So a big part of applying to an office is conveying this openness. I think that's very important. And the ability to work in a team, right? And how well you're going to integrate into their office. Because if you're a younger designer and you're going to work at an office and your name is Steve, it's not the Steve show. The office is not the Steve show. It's the whoever owns the office show. And they might give a lot of responsibility to specific people, but still, it's not your show. In grad school, though, it's more your show. My feeling with grad schools and these kinds of universities is, what we think about, what do they want out of their students and out of their graduates, their alumni, right? Their alumnus. Well, what they want is for them to go off and solve cancer, find the cure for cancer. If a school sees that this applicant shows promise to solving cancer, right? Providing a cure for cancer, and they do it, that's the best thing in the world, because now we can say this person's a Columbia graduate. Columbia solved cancer is what happens, right? So what they're interested in is highly dedicated, highly self-motivated people who are going to go off and do amazing things that are in line with their ethos, right? And that is a little bit different from an office where, they just want someone who's going to do good work, think creatively, and not cause problems. It's different, right? I hope that difference is clear.
Yeah, no, I think grad school, it's really more about who you are.
Yeah.
And working for a firm, it's a little less about that. It's who you could be,
And grad schools for architecture are much more tailored in the sense that each one I wouldn't say they each have their own focus. Some of them have very similar ones, but they have their own kind of way of looking at things and stuff like that. So you have to prove that you are in line with what they're doing.
I think when I applied to grad school, I applied to Columbia in New York for an urban design program, and I got in. And I think what made a difference was probably my letter, to apply. Because it's more about your story, right? Like where you're from, what makes you want to go to school, and what's your ambition for after that. The portfolio, I think, I can't remember, but I think I approached it similar way I approached it for a job. I probably included more personal things into it, more personal interests, so just to show them kind of all of my personality facets so they can paint the image of who I was.
Yeah. Because the other thing too was like, historically speaking, the mixing of two different professions that are typically separate is where like innovation and interesting comes into play. So if you have a background in music production, or let's say you're a social media influencer or something like this that's not related to architecture, if there's a way to, first you should show that to them, right? And if it's important to you and what you want to do, to have that be part of the conversation, that's really great. It's something new, it's different, it's going to distinguish you from everyone else, and therefore could mean that you're going to be that one person who cures cancer kind of thing. So you do need to prove that you're philosophically in line with what they're thinking, and to know what they're thinking, you have to know these specific faculty members that are there. And grad programs are very much defined by the people who happen to be there at that time. You get a new directorate, program could change radically from one way or the other. Despite the generic like mission statement of the university is almost useless in a way, because it's like, if you get a new person, they're going to do whatever the fuck they want and bring in their people. So you have to know the people there down to the specific individuals. So you need to prove an alignment with them, but you don't want to be overly confident in what you know you're going to do. So there's an openness aspect that still exists, although it's slightly different. Because I think you don't want to come across as being overly arrogant, and you want to. I always viewed it as if you're kind of approaching the school and saying, I have these interests, these ideas. I'm super hungry, thirsty. You have the resources, and you also have people who think like me, and I acknowledge you're smarter than me and whatever, these expertise. I want to work with you and learn from you to do great things together, or let me represent the school, right? As opposed to saying, I know what I want, I know exactly how I'm going to do it, I just need to take this class and I'll be good to go. That's a little bit aggressive. And also as opposed to saying like, I don't know, it sounds good. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So I would say I definitely mention your personal interest, in the letter, in the portfolio, the types of images or things you're doing. I think it's a great idea. Languages. Well, I think ideally you want to use the language of the country you're applying to.
I don't know what they mean by languages.
But I'm sure they're not expecting, like if you apply in like Sweden, I'm sure they don't expect you to speak Swedish. Mm-hmm. So you can probably apply in English and you'll be fine, especially if you're a foreigner. I think it's okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right,
Mm-hmm. I think also what was it? Oh, that. And this is really specific to, I think the covered letter. No, this would apply to everything. You need to be able to tell a story. You can't convey information just as like a bullet point list of all the things I've done and what I want to do. There needs to be some kind of story. There needs to be an arc. There needs to be rhythm to it. And there needs to be very clearly that there is this potential for a fantastic conclusion, and they're a key part of it. And you are a key part of it, right? Because the story, am I making sense? What? A narrative. You need to to sell yourself in a narrative.
You need a story that they will remember.
And you need a story where the final part of it, the final chapter, includes the both of you, and it's clear that it includes the both of you, and that it will happen if they accept you, right?
To both of yourself?
You and the school.
Oh.
I think that's another way to kind of paint the picture and sell yourself to them, and it's also, as you said, more memorable.
Like if you say, I'm applying to architecture grad school because I love buildings. Okay, well, don't never gonna remember you. If you explain that, you really love architecture and you want to study because your mom was pregnant of you and she gave birth of you and in the monument in the Eiffel Tower on the last floor on Christmas Day, well, that's pretty fucking memorable,
Right.
But I mean memorable, it doesn't need to be a big event, but I think it's good to go in very sincere, honest details. Specifics. And I would always remember I had an art teacher, art history teacher, who would ask us to write about old paintings and stuff, like descriptions and things, and she was always saying use as many adjectives as possible to describe it, right? Because it makes the discourse richer, and you can paint the picture just by reading those words. And I think you should really use that when you write an application letter. It's not just a cold steel letter, you're actually putting your soul on the paper.
Yeah, and actually this reminds me a good point in terms of writing generally, long form writing, not resume writing, is if you're going to grad school, that means you've done undergrad 4 years or 5 years already. You've got to avoid the academic jargon, heretofore, therefore, but worth, if bullshit nonsense. You don't put any of that stuff in, because it's people who know how to write, they don't do that. Unless you're writing about philosophy, and the writing is not really... It's not story. It needs to be a story, and that kind of writing is not storytelling. It's mathematical. You ever read philosophy? It's math. It's math and words. A plus C is C, and C therefore. Yeah. It's not what you want to do in this. Also, it sounds arrogant. Also, it sounds like an amateur. Also, it's most of the time not even right. So, what I would do is keep it super simple and basic. Flourish it up with what it needs to be, to the elements needed to make a story, right? And then if you want, go back and add some of this other stuff where it needs it. But people in the academic world who are the teachers, they're just fucking tired of reading these things, because it doesn't make sense.
And that's why I think, being as honest as you can be, don't try to make it up or make it sound like whatever. Yeah. Just, they want you, obviously, so you got to make them want you and not who you're pretending to be. And I think that I really think that letter is what got me there.
Could be. It could be.
I mean, my portfolio was cool, but I don't think it was anything, world breaking. So, yeah.
And one of the courses I took in grad school, that was the first thing we learned, was everyone stop writing like this. Drove the teacher nuts. She's why is everyone writing like this? It doesn't make any sense. Stop it.
But that's the thing. You have to imagine that those people are reading hundreds of application letters. You gotta give them a breath of fresh air, a breath of something. They want to hear more from you after reading the letter. They don't want to be oh, thank God. Okay, next one.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a pretty good chat around grad school application. I can't think of anything else. It is the time when everyone's going to be applying. I think those are the big points. And going back to the portfolio, I think structurally the same things still apply. Clear organization, and having labels and markers and calling out things that are important and not relying just on the graphics of the work. I think all of that still applies. Just transfer it to this.
And get recommendation letters too. Really be specific of who you're asking to get your letters of recommendation from. Sometimes if they're even nice, they would tell you about what they want to say about you, which could be helpful, because then you can decide who you're going to use and for what school. You also have to remember which school you're applying to, what they are into, and tailor the materials you're supplying to that.
I would say each application you do, it depends on the schools you're applying to, but they could be actually different from one another. Yeah. So you're going to have a different set of applications for each school. I think that's about it for that one, right?
Yeah. And if you have, different backgrounds too, I think it's, I have a friend who was in architecture and she just went to business school. It's possible. You know, it's possible,
Oh,
and
for
the
a different
difference
thing?
of background and major, and I think it's if you want to go to school, to grad school, to undergrad school, and that's something you really feel inside that's what you want, don't think that you're never gonna make it or you have no chances, because trust me, you have as many chances as everybody else.
Last thing is that if you think you're going to go to grad school for architecture or urban design, or those two, and you're going to come out and make more money, don't think that. That's not the case. You probably won't make more money. You're going to go back to making the amount of money you were before, most likely.
At least in the US.
I mean, you could get a better job and they pay you more money, but typically, no. Just going to grad school doesn't mean more money. And beyond that, that's it for this week, right?
I think it's pretty good.
Okay, cool. Thanks everyone for listening. We really appreciate it. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, Player FM, everywhere. Leave a review.
Instagram, Twitter.
We're on all the social medias. Leave a review, please, if you can, in the podcast app. That's super important to supporting this show.
There is a tutorial on our website on how to do it. If you can't figure it out, go there. And
call us on the hotline 213-222-6950 to leave us a voicemail about anything that any updates in your life. And what we're going to try and do is answer those at least within by that week. So a week and a half or so.
Making promises here.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. And yeah, it should be good. So we really appreciate that you're listening and that you're reaching out to us. And we'll talk to you again next week. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.